Scams. How many of us been through scams? Before we go any further, let's talk about scams. Years ago, years ago, 80s, probably the 80s, there was a song called Friends. It'd say, friends, how many of us have them? Let's talk about friends before we go any further. Well, I just flipped it and said scams, did my own take on it. You know? Right now, if you haven't noticed, we've gone into a recession that is not really being acknowledged, but it's definitely happening. And one of the ways that you can tell that you're in a full-blown recession is that you'll see scams are on the rise, okay? Because when the cost of living, cost of goods, all of that goes up, there are those that are, trying to seek a quick buck by taking shortcuts. They all come out of the woodwork, a lot more than usual. It's like a flood. It's like locusts or something. It's like a plague. Everywhere you turn, there's another scam. So, like I said in the last video that I did, I was talking about the importance of certain principles when you're trying to achieve things. Things like being patient, being consistent, things like that. All right? Principles. Principles are important. Principles will help you. Principles can save you. Okay? So even though we're in a recession, there are ways to help mitigate the things that come with a recession. All right? And one of the most helpful things to do is to adhere to tried and true tested principles. All right? So I was listening to this fella on YouTube, and he gives financial advice, tax advice, and someone calls in and they said, I need some advice. I need some tax advice. And it's not really important what he was asking, but something that stuck out to me was this. The guy's married. The guy himself makes 6 figures. His wife makes 5 figures. And he says, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. All right? And he had heard about some shady tax information that he was told could be used to help pay for something, get some kind of deductions. It was incorrect information, but seemed like the person was willing to listen because he's in a financial bind. But the thing that was really interesting is why he's in a financial bind. He actually doesn't have to be in a financial bind. What it came down to when he was being questioned by the financial person was that he was, number one, he didn't have a budget. They did not have a budget. And you need to have a budget, whether you're living in good times, financially speaking, or you're living in financially challenging times. Always got to have a budget. And you want to budget it in such a way that every dollar that you make has a purpose. It has something to do. All right? Because if you don't do that, if you're not aware of your financial obligations and perhaps your short-term and your long-term goals, you're gonna spend your money on things that you don't need. Because, and here's a principle, in life, we as human beings actually don't have many needs. We make more needs based off of how we are marketed to by advertisers, okay? They use psychological tricks to make us think that the things that they are selling are necessities, when in fact most of those things are not, all right? Basically, you need shelter, food, clothing, all right? I mean, those are your basic needs, right? We don't need a lot of things that we get ourselves into financial predicaments in order to acquire, all right? So anyways, this person was, number one, he did not have a budget, which is not a good idea. You should have a budget. And number two, he discovered that he was getting too much takeout, ordering, too much, restaurants, fast food, things like this, not cooking at home. Now, two issues with that, all right? Number one, restaurant food is overpriced a lot of the times, and it's not the healthiest, even though it may taste good, all right? But you don't think that you might not perceive that it's overpriced, because you may go, depending on what you get, you might spend $10 a person, you may spend $20 a person or more. It doesn't really seem that much. I mean, it's not like a grocery bill, usually, okay? But these things add up. And if you're not tracking it, you will find that you may be spending hundreds of dollars on takeout every month, all right? Now, let's say you're spending $200 a month on takeout, all right? You might not notice it, but think about this. That's $2,400 a year. That's $4,800 in 2 years. What could you do with that kind of money? 10 years, what could you do with that? All right? 10 years of takeout is like $24,000. What could you have done with that money? Okay? Another thing, health is also wealth, all right? So by not getting takeout, by eating at home, and especially if you are eating the right foods, you're saving money and you're taking in better nutrition, better nutrients. All right? So that's like two types of wealth right there. And what I'm freestyling. I'm not going off of any notes or anything. I'm just talking. I just felt like talking because I'm back in my free studio here with the free light. So I figured let me do one of these. And when you do that, when you try to limit yourself to mostly the necessities. I know it's difficult today to really live on the necessities like it was in the past. Just because of all of the mass marketing and everything like that, it really makes it difficult. But if you limit yourself as best as you can, and you save money, and you budget money, and you plan your spending, okay? And you build yourself a nice nest egg. When times like these come, these financially tough times, you have something to fall back on. You don't become desperate as quick as other people who don't follow these basic principles. And you don't fall prey to scams. All right? So anyway, that's what I was listening to the video, and I always try to point the finger at myself when I hear things. So, I try to accuse myself. All right, am I doing this? If so, how can I correct it? All right, and I am guilty of some of those things, and I plan to correct those things. All right, and I think that a lot of us get into those situations. A lot of times we put ourselves into precarious situations. And it could be we don't have the knowledge on a thing, it could be other things. But the fact is, today, there is information available to remove that ignorance. So we don't have to get into those situations. All right? Anyways, my point is, in this season of financial depression, you can't watch out for those scammers. Don't try not to fall prey to those scams. All right.